Well, I guess it looks like we're gonna have a quieter video today, but Happy New Year, by the way. Hey, I hope you've been doing well. It was nice to take a little break, and now we're all refreshed and charged up to do some great things this year. Well, unless you're like me. In that case, you probably are full of dreams and aspirations to do great things, and then you crumble a little under the weight of those aspirations. Like, oh, if I did that thing, that would just be amazing. And then, but I don't think I can actually make it as amazing as I can imagine it. And then before you know it, a week or two or more has passed and you've anxiety procrastinated yourself right out of doing the thing or even starting it at all. We have fun, don't we? I mean, the answer to that is yes, because sometimes we talk about science communicators and sometimes we talk about other unimaginably delightful things, like poems and Burkean dramatism. But actually, on the topic of science communicators, we've talked about some of the rhetorical strategies that science communicators use to build and maintain audiences on YouTube, and we'll have more to talk about on that topic soon enough. But here, on the welcome mat of a new year, I wanted to share something else I learned while studying popular science rhetoric. Something that has helped me to get over the hurdle of it won't be good enough procrastination, and that I also hope will help you to get going on whatever writing or creative project you have on your vision boards. Well, this is strange. Where am I? Why, you're in Tinylandia, the smallest realm in all the realms. Well, it feels pretty big to me. Well, yes, but that's only because your subatomic size makes the realm appear larger. Now, tell me, stranger, what is it that you seek in fair Tinylandia? Actually, nothing. I mean, I don't even really know how I got here. Could it be? Are you the chosen one? See, when I was toiling away at my little dissertation station, I had sampled videos from various creators, and we've talked about most of them already. Of course, I wanted to look at their most popular videos to see what worked, but I also took some of their oldest and most recent to see if there were any discernible shifts in strategy over time as science popularizers gained experience sharing science with the rest of us. And as I did that, I made the encouraging and maybe not so surprising discovery that nobody's earliest videos were all that good. At least not in comparison to where they ended up. And let's take a look. Well, actually, our trajectory friend isn't here, so I'll just have to figure out how we're going to do this without him. Okay, so anyway, take a look at early Veritasium versus experienced Veritasium.
In science, we often need to deal with some very large numbers. For example, the mass of the sun. That is the mass of the sun. A 2 followed by 30 zeros in units of kilograms. That is 2,000 billion kilograms. There has got to be a better way to write that.
These are soft robots. Their structural components are built not out of metal or wood, but flexible materials like plastic tubing. But how do they work? And why would you want a soft robot in the first place? So I came up to Stanford to meet Zach Hammond and his soft robot.
How's it going? All right, you want to tip it? So is the idea that the robot could walk this way?
Totally, yeah. So you can kind of chain these rolls together to kind of roll around in any environment. They call this punctuated rolling locomotion.
Or look at early Physics Girl and experienced Physics Girl.
Inside your clicky pen is a science experiment waiting to spring forth. Fill a cup with water. Place the spring from your clicky pen ever so gently into the water. It floats!
Look at this, okay, so here's a trail, and the trail goes pop, 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 pop over here, and then it takes a right angle turn.
There are rocks in the Death Valley Desert that move across the ground on their own, leaving behind bizarrely long tracks. And for a century, nobody could figure out why.
So look at the size of that puppy. And it turns out no sweat to move every single rock out here. We're talking many, many bulldozers' strength worth of force.
So what force has been making rocks move for over 100 years when humans aren't looking?
Or even early Smarter Every Day and experienced Smarter Every Day.
Hey, it's me, Destin. I got my dad a present for Father's Day, and it's kind of weird. So I figured I'd show you an interesting principle with the present. It's a chicken. I got my dad a chicken for Father's Day. And I want to show you a pretty interesting method that chickens have to keep their head stable. You know, in guidance and control, you have feedback loops. And so you have to know your position and where your relative motion is going so you can compensate for it. But chickens are really good at this. So I'll show you. Watch his head stay totally stationary as I move his body.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. We're at that magical moment where you build something in the garage, a culmination of a week and a half of effort, and then you kind of all have your hands in your pockets. This is Jeremy Fielding, this is Trent, this is George. We're about to have what we're calling Weird Wars. But today, we have to figure out which one of these lines is the strongest. We're gonna do a single elimination tournament, much like gladiators in Rome. We're gonna pick out these shapes, we're gonna put them on the tournament grid here, we're gonna fight them to the death, and this is the device that we're gonna use to test them.
None of them started out as skillful as they ended up, and I find that pretty encouraging. They got better at being on camera, at showcasing interesting visuals, at engaging audiences in rhetorically effective ways. But, and I'll emphasize it again, they got better. They got better at what they were doing as they were doing it. Well, I don't know. What does it mean to be the chosen one? Oh, the chosen one is one foretold in our ancient myths, who will one day solve a serious problem with unimaginable power. Wait, is that really what your ancient myth says? Yes, well, there will be a serious problem someday, and the chosen one will fix it using far more power than is necessary. Well, that doesn't sound like me. I guess I'm mostly just passing through. Like I said, I don't know how I got here, and I'd really just like to get home. I see. Well, unchosen one, you are free to sojourn through our lands, but please be cautious around the quirky quarks. Quirky quarks? Ah yes, we all know of the charm and strange quarks that are beloved across all of tinylandia. But one day, many days ago, a brilliant flash of light was witnessed from the macrosphere, and thereafter the realm of tinylandia was dotted with quirky quarks. They don't really do much, actually. They just kind of sit there, but they do seem perhaps to be laughing, and maybe in a charming but vaguely menacing manner. We have left them largely undisturbed in their place ever since they fell, and they have done us no harm. So please, dear traveler, should you happen upon a quirky quark, we ask only that you leave it untouched. Yeah, okay, but actually, before I go, do you know how a guy around here could end up getting back to normal size? No. And it really isn't going to get much deeper than that. The world is full of examples of people who started something and then got better at it as they went along. And my anxious procrastination does its best to make me forget that. And if I forget it all the time, well, then I'm sure other people do too. See, when I started my research project, this show was already a couple years old, and I was used to seeing experienced science communicators and thinking that it must be nice to be as good at it as they were. Like, I was proud of what I was doing, but I could also see the gap between what I was doing and what the channels I was studying were doing. So it was encouraging to see that they didn't start out that way. And so then I thought, hey, maybe I can get better too. And seeing consistent patterns in the ways that they improved, many of which we've already talked about in previous videos, helped me to find a way forward. And between you and me, there are still miles to go, but I think I'm making okay progress from where I started. At the very least, I'm not sitting on the floor anymore. Plus, in my favorite little guide to poetry, Ted Kuzer writes this: beginning poets sometimes start off trying to stand on the shoulders of famous poets, imitating the difficult and obscure poems those successful poets published. That's understandable, but they soon learn that somehow no literary journal is interested in publishing their difficult poems. If these beginners were to study the careers of the famous poets upon whose work they're modeling their own, they'd find that those writers were often, in their early years, publishing clear, understandable poems. In most instances, only after establishing reputations could they go on to write in more challenging ways. In other words, we can easily fall into the trap of comparing where we're starting with where someone else ended up. But that's not a very helpful comparison to make. It would be much more useful to think about where we're starting out and how it compares to where the people we admire started out. So for me, seeing where those science communicators started out gave me some confidence in where I was starting, because it was a clear illustration of the fact that everyone has to start somewhere, and that no matter where you start, you can still learn to accomplish great things. And as a quick note, lest we think that Kuzer is advocating for an inevitable march into obscure poetry, he says earlier on the page, "A poet who writes poetry that doesn't require explanation, who writes clear and accessible poems, is of little use to critics building their own careers as interpreters. But a clear and accessible poem can be of use to an everyday reader." So sure, aspire to write for the critics and academics if you want to, but it's probably good to start and maybe even continue writing for real people too. Wow, this place is just so big, but also so small, and yet so big, but small at the same time. And I just don't know how I'm ever gonna get out of here. Oh no, it looks like it's one of those quirky quarks that molecule was warning me about. Hello? Well, hello. You look strangely familiar, stranger. Have we met before? Well, I doubt it, since I've never actually been this size before, and I'm really just looking for a way home, so I just can't stay. Oh, but hang on, I can help you. How? Well, actually, do you have a friend? I could be your friend. Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver, the other... Gold. Gold. Yes, I do have a friend that's made of gold. How did you know that? Oh, I'm certain I don't, but I'll tell you what. I am a quirky quark, and I can sense countless other quirky quarks scattered across this realm. See, quirky quarks have very unique gravity, but we're scattered so perfectly that none of us can move out of place to be reunited with the others. But if you could impart just a little puff of kinetic energy my way, that could disrupt the stasis and reunite me with my family. Okay, well, thanks for telling me, but I'm really not supposed to touch you, and how would that help me get home anyway? Oh, I'm certain it doesn't, but also I'm pretty sure I have an enlarging ray somewhere in my pocket. Of course, I don't have any hands, so you'll have to reach it out yourself. But then, of course, once you've done that, you can use it if you want to. Well, that does kind of seem like my only option. No, I'm certain that it's not, but it is the best option presenting itself to you now. So what's the worst that could happen? Well, okay. So the takeaway is this. If you've got some kind of project you aspire to do, just get going. Just start. Start writing the poems or the chapters or the whatever else. Take some time to plan, sure, but don't use planning as an excuse not to start. And then, once you've started, learn as you go. You get better at writing by writing. You get better at making science videos by making science videos. You get a better sense for your tools, for the language, for your own style and preferences, and for your audience. And those are virtually impossible things to learn by just thinking about them in theory. Sure, learning is good. Reading a book about poetry is a great thing to do, but it's not a substitute for writing poems. Practice is what counts, and so all you need to do to get started is to start practicing. And count it all as practice. When these science communicators started out, they didn't have the huge audiences they have now, so the roughness in their content had pretty low stakes. Don't worry about writing a bad poem now, because pretty much nobody is going to be reading your poetry now. And as a bonus, pretty much nobody is reading poetry at all anyway, so there's really nothing to be embarrassed about. And really, there's not much else to say beyond that. I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying it to you. Right now, you don't need to worry about how good your project has to be in the end, or how skilled you don't think you are, or how much you think is at stake in your success or failure. Right now, the single most important thing you can do is get started. Once you've started, then you can get better, and you will, because that's how practice works. So go on and get started on something that may eventually be grand and amazing, but that doesn't have to be today. Today is not the day to impress people. Today is just the day to begin.